Hello and welcome to Food Side Fridays. My name is Kalisa Marie, aka Kalisa Marie Eats, and I'm going to be taking you through the science of food each week using Harold McGee's On Food and Cooking as a guide. And this is episode 1, and we're going to dive right into chapter 1, which is milk and dairy products. McGee picks a great place to start because milk is one of the most interesting foods. Not only is it what sets us apart as mammals, but due to its composition, it can transform in so many magical ways. Well, okay, not with magic, but with science. And this milk here can become whipped cream, ice cream, cheese, yogurt, and so many other foods. They all have their own structures and tastes, but it's the starting composition of milk that makes it all possible. But before we dive into the composition of milk, let's talk about the 4 basic molecules in all foods. McGee gets into this later on in the book in chapter 15, but it's important that we start to wrap our heads around it now. The 4 main food molecules are water, lipids or fats and oils, carbohydrates, and proteins. Now, if you've ever counted your macros or anything like that, you're already used to thinking of food this way. But if not, just take my word for it that these are the 4 chemical protagonists in all food and cooking processes. Okay, now let's talk specifically about milk. Cow's milk on average has about 87.4% water, 4.8% carbs, 3.7% fat, and 3.4% protein, and about 0.7% minerals. Those proportions will vary depending on the type of animal, whether we're talking about cows, sheep, goats, buffaloes, and so on. And even within one type of animal, it can vary depending on their environment, genetics, their diet, and so on. Now, let's get into how these molecules play a role in milk as we know it. First up, carbohydrates. In milk, there's just one type of carbohydrate, and that's lactose. It's made up of 2 simple sugars called glucose and galactose. Here are the main things you need to know about lactose. First, we can't absorb lactose as it is. We need a special enzyme called lactase to break it down. Now, we all have lactase in our small intestines as infants, but those levels decline as we're weaned. And without the lactase in our small intestines, the lactose will continue to travel down to our large intestines, where bacteria then break it down and produce some uncomfortable gases. This is what happens to the majority of people on Earth. There are some groups of people who, several thousand years ago, underwent a genetic change that allowed them to continue to produce lactase throughout their life, but that was just because milk was an important resource in their colder climates. I'm not one of those people, so I take little tablets that contain the enzyme whenever I'm about to eat dairy, or I'll drink products that already have the lactase in it. So if you've ever seen like lactose-free milk at the supermarket, that's real milk from a cow. They just drop in the enzyme while it's being processed, so by the time it gets to you, it's lactose-free. The second thing to know about lactose is that a specific type of microbe converts this milk sugar into lactic acid before other microbes can get to it. So it turns it sour but preserves it from spoiling. We'll get into this more when we talk about milk fermentation. Lastly, lactose is what gives milk its sweet taste, of course, and accounts for about 40% of the calories in cow's milk. Now with the fat. Milk fat accounts for most of the body or the thickness of milk and is also the main factor in its price. The higher the fat content, the more cream or butter can be made from it, and so the more expensive it is. Also, it's the fat globules that carry the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Last up are the proteins. While there are dozens of different types of proteins found in milk, when it comes to cooking behavior, we can really narrow them down to just 2, the curds and the whey. Sounds familiar, right? Now, the main difference between the 2 is how they react to acid. The curds, also known as caseins, they clump together in acidic conditions, and that's also known as coagulations. But on the other hand, whey proteins, they don't, and in fact, they stay suspended in the liquid. Now, caseins are what make thickened milk products like yogurt and cheese possible, whereas whey protein is responsible for other things like the foam on top of your fancy cup of coffee. Whey proteins are also outnumbered by casein proteins 4-1. Now that we've discussed the composition of milk, we'll demonstrate how these components transform milk into our favorite dairy products over the next couple episodes. Join me on Wednesday for a live chat as we discuss this episode, any of your dairy questions, or any other food science topic you want to see covered in a future episode. Thanks.